Welcome to Wild Development Studio. Join us as we venture into the breathtaking realm of wildlife arts and untamed adventures. With captivating stories from the field and ideas to dive into the visual arts, we'll ignite your passion for conservation. Get ready to develop something wild.
Welcome to Wild Developments. You're in the right place if you're looking for a heartfelt connection with nature through the visual arts and storytelling. Today, we have coach, thought leader, and trusted advisor, Dr. Kathy Allen, on the show. She helps organizations and individuals create meaningful change using nature as a model for effective leadership practices. She is the author of the popular book, Leading from the Roots, Nature-Inspired Leadership Lessons for Today's World, and provides new insights each week at kathleenallen.net. Please give a very warm welcome and wild welcome to Dr. Kathy Allen. Thank you for being here.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's a pleasure. And I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Absolutely. I am so fascinated by using the idea of nature to inspire us in the workforce. Why is nature a good teacher, and where does that come up in leadership?
Well, we're kind of in a tough time right now. We have a lot of ways that we've been organizing ourselves and leading organizations, but they haven't really turned out all that well for us. We have clearly pretty significant climate change going on with lots of disruptive weather. And so it would suggest that the model that we've been using for the last century plus maybe isn't really serving our future and the generations of our future. So the reason I went to nature is that it's the only really regenerative system that we have to learn from. And we have to start thinking about how do we design our organizations, our communities, our life from a regenerative perspective. And nature has regenerated itself 5 times through 5 mass extinctions, and life still exists here. So it knows how to do this. It's had 3.8 billion years to study and do R&D, and it maintains its beautiful purpose, which is to create conditions conducive to the life of future generations. So I think that between all of that, there's a lot to learn, and we could apply those to our organizations.
So what is a living system?
Well, in some ways, our traditional management theories think that organizations are static. So they basically are still. And then in order to get them moving or changing, you have to have some catalyst to get them moving. But living systems, just think of yourself as a living system, for example. We change and we move and we adapt and we learn and we evolve all the time. So in nature changes all the time, but it really pays attention to whether it's evolving or not. And so change is not necessarily something to fear or to stop, but it's just an acceptance in a living system framework that we're changing all the time. The question is, do we want to evolve?
Is it evolve, or I guess
Learn,
yeah.
gain insights. Yeah. Think about what we need to let go of because it's no longer serving us. Think about what we would like to do that would enhance our own ability to thrive, our organization's ability to thrive, the people who work in that organization's ability to thrive, and future generations to thrive. Those are the questions and lessons I'm seeking from nature.
And what a great time with January and everything, learning to let go of the things that are not serving us anymore.
I know.
So what got you into this type of work to begin with?
Actually, it started about over 20 years ago. I was doing consulting work as both an executive coach and an organization development consultant. And I discovered a book called Biomimicry, which Jeannie Benyus wrote. And I was just so stimulated by her framework, which is using mentor as a model, a mentor and a way of measuring the quality of what we're doing. And it just fired so many sparks in my head that I started experimenting with my clients to think of them not as objects or the people in them, not as cogs in a kind of a machine deadening kind of place, but as human beings who live and are alive and are working in a filling organizations so that organizations are also alive. And what I discovered in those experiments was that people didn't resist change as much when they were treated as a human being. What a concept.
Right?
And they liked to see them be seen and heard and respected for their point of view. And they loved not being seen as an object in their organization. So when you start leading or coaching or working with an organization from a living system frame, you start to unleash a totally different kind of way of feeling about the organization and feeling seen as a human, living human being in that organization. So they love it, actually. It's amazing how much the resistance to change is embedded in the feeling that we're just objects to be exploited.
Yeah. I've often heard that people don't quit their jobs, they quit their employers. And someone who's come from a very dysfunctional workplace in the past, if they would have treated me more like a human and in using the methods that you were using, I think that it would definitely have been a healthier work environment. So, how are some other ways that we can help to navigate a healthier workplace?
There are thousands, actually, but I could talk about one story that might be applicable here. So I do some work in Nebraska, and one of the times I was visiting there, there's a place called Grand Island, Nebraska, which is kind of right smack in the middle of it, that happens to be a pathway for the migration of up to 1 million sandhill cranes every twice a year. So once in the spring and once in the fall, they are either flying south to Mexico or flying north to Canada. And and so in the midst of this retreat, we took some time to go and observe the migration. And they have duck blinds that you can go and sit and watch. And it was really just a stunning uh, thing to see. And at dusk, the sky almost completely blocked out because there were so many of these large cranes in the air flying into nest overnight in these kind of shallow waterways and grass. And then they would go out. So they come in and they hang out for about 3 weeks to forage around um, the land. So they gain more energy for the next stage of their journey. And what I learned from that, there were a couple of things that I felt really powerful. One was that they don't do change as a forced march. So they would substitute in nature, they would substitute, well, let's migrate towards this place, as opposed to let's make this happen by April 30th kind of thing, which is more normal in
Mhm.
organizations. And the migration then is a metaphor for let's go on a journey and let's be, but we're also really clear about our destination. You know, they know where they're going to go and they know when they return where they're returning to. So there's this clarity of purpose and clarity of understanding of why this matters, why are we doing it, that we often don't talk about as organizations. We just say, well, it's been decided that this is what we need to do, and so you're going to have to shift. And so without that meaning and context, we resist because that seems like a more logical thing. One of the things about living systems is that they only pay attention to what matters to them. So if you don't explain why it matters, people aren't going to go there.
Yeah.
So that was one, is to shift my language to migration instead of change. Let's go on a journey together. Let's be open. Let's learn. Let's see what matters. Let's see, and then also be really clear about where we want to go. Even if where we want to go isn't fully clear, we have a purpose that we're trying to do, that we're adapting in order to serve that larger purpose. So that was one lesson. And the second was this stunning visual of these crane. Their wingspan is over 6 feet. So they're not small birds in the air, but they don't land on top of each other. So you have half of them nesting in this kind of beautiful, grassy, watery kind of place. But for some reason or other, they have a very good spatial awareness with each other in the air and also on the ground. And I discovered later that they operate kind of on three core principles. They tend to fly at the same speed. They fly with the same direction, and they fly in proximity to each other. And it's those three elements that help them not to run into each other in the air. And also, they don't land on top of each other as they're coming in for nesting. And I thought to myself, how would an organization look if we flew at the same speed and direction and in relationship to each other, as opposed to separate silos, flying in different directions, perhaps, and at different rates of speed?
It sounds like a recipe for teamwork.
It does, doesn't it? I know. It's just
Great.
it's a beautiful, beautiful visual image, but it also helps us think. So here's another kind of lesson from nature and regenerative systems, is that nature, we are, as human beings, we are part of nature. So all of these lessons that are in nature were probably part of our ancient wisdom as human beings, but in very, very early civilizations when we were very deeply connected to nature. But we've kind of let go a lot of that wisdom and knowledge. And so if we're part of nature, it means that we have the capacity to do things like self-organize, and we have the capacity to learn, and we have the capacity to evolve. We don't have to wait around for a leader or a CEO to tell us who we are and what we do or should do, because there's no CEO in nature, but there's a powerful purpose. And then nature goes around and unleashes everything else to learn and serve that larger purpose.
I love that. Why do you think we have become so disconnected with nature?
Um, I think that, well, one answer, there's probably lots of nuanced answers to this, but one answer is that, we didn't really have a lot of organizations until the early 1900s. And that was kind of our shift, moving out of the totally agrarian society, where we were very deeply connected to the production of food and community. But as we started building organizations, it happened to coincide with this growth of machinery as an extension of our ability to influence as human beings. So steam engines, trains, Model T Fords, cars. And so we were kind of, as organizations were rising, we were also kind of in a love affair with the machine. And so we were so fascinated by this thing that we were inventing as a kind of a society. I think that those ideas of design slipped into the humanness of our organizations. And so, Henry Ford started the Model T business with having teams who operated more like craftsmen and actually more like nature in some ways, where They all contributed to creating a whole product, a whole car. And then, it was such a popular thing to have a car at that time that they realized they had to up their their production. And so they created assembly lines. And in the Henry Ford Museum, you can go and read the letters of the wives of the men who had shifted from these teams producing a pride of craft of a car together to the assembly line where they were told they could only focus on one small part of the car. And how the wives were telling him, please go back to this other way because this is diminishing my husband as a human being. And so but that was the core part of that shift to the assembly line. And it was like we made some shift towards organizing organizations like what we thought machines needed to be organized. And we leached the humanness out of our organizations.
That's a really good answer. And I love that we're using a machine to talk to each other now from across a great distance to try and connect people back to what makes us human and to nature. And I do want to talk about your book, Leading from the Roots. You discuss mature ecosystems in nature and how that they can be applied to your organization. Why did you decide to go with mature ecological systems? Why not like a brand new ecosystem?
Well, the way nature evolves, it starts with a kind of a stage one ecology where the soil isn't very it doesn't really nourish many plants. So mostly weeds and annuals live there. It's all short lived. They bloom, they die, and in that death process, they amend the soil over time. And then as the soil gets better, eventually it can support another kind of phase of plant life and tree life, which is called stage two ecology. So that's where your perennials start showing up and your tubers and your root structure. And so plants um, bloom, but they also put some of their nutrients back into the root structure so that they can come back the following spring and have another run at things. They have shrubs and short-lived trees, short-lived meaning 30 years kind of short-lived trees live there. So they begin to, and they also continue to amend the soil. But type 3 ecologies are interesting because so as these ecologies evolve, they become more diverse. And what I love about type 3 ecologies is that's where your old growth forest, your mature coral reefs, your mature prairies exist. And they call these kinds of systems generous systems. And it's generous because the level of diversity in the ecosystem allow for the system for the first time not to just depend on the soil for its life, but depend on each other. So they begin to discover these mutually shaping relationships, like bees cross pollinating fruits and vegetables. And so what they discover is that what might be an abundance for one species or might be a scarcity for another. And so they start collaborating. And so this is where systems become more deeply connected and interdependent and um, and they and more abundant as a system. And so I always think, aspirationally, that's the kind of place I'd like to work.
Me too. Do you have any examples of how an organization has used your methods to improve their business?
Lots, actually. I think that one simple lesson from nature is that they are connected and interdependent. So there's a high connectivity that happens in nature, and you just assume that connection and interconnection. In human organizations, because we grew out of a machine metaphor, we still fight against things like silos and separations and feelings of disconnect. And so organizations that have embraced, that I've worked with, that have just simply embraced the fact that they're connected, they start changing the way they make decisions. They change who is in the room to help make a decision. They assume that there's multiple stakeholders that may have knowledge and insight that would help us make better decisions. They assume that you can't just lob off a person and not have it affect the organization. That everything connects, and so you make better decisions. And that's usually a very simple place of where we start. And it's not just connective or connectivity within the organization, but to the larger environment. So I've had organizations, for example, who have kind of not just built a silo within their organization, but they've siloed themselves from their customers, from their potential clients. And what happens when you close yourself off is you don't stay in touch with what's changing and what you need to learn and evolve. And so eventually they almost kill themselves off with that kind of highly bounded, closed organization. And so interdependence also teaches us to open us up, and then we start learning, and then that causes us to start innovating and start asking better questions and different questions. And then we change and we become more effective and more purposeful and more contributive to the larger community or ecosystem. So I often think that change flows down the quality and lines of relationships we have with each other at the speed of trust. And so that's a simple extension of the idea of interdependence.
I don't even know where to go from there. That's a lot to take in. That's great. I want to come work for you. Now, you got a new book coming out too, called Following Nature's Lead. Do you have any spoilers you can tell us about that one?
Well, I love it because, you write a book, and some people write a book and they stop evolving their ideas. But I wrote this book and I had a certain way of thinking about things and a certain level of knowledge and experience and applications. But you keep learning and growing and evolving in your thinking. And so this brings forward, some of my, since I wrote the book, some additional ways that I've been applying and thinking about how these things all fit together. And it's a wonderful journey once you go down the path. And so this is going to be a very short ebook of sorts. It'll be, nice, condensed nuggets of wisdom that people can use and directly apply to their organization, so they can start anywhere. But one of the chapters is going to be called softness. And we're so focused on tangible key performance indicators, right? And we are very much into only measuring what we can see, what we can profit, productivity. That's our predisposition. But nature has taught me that just like there is a root structure to every plant and tree, the root structure, what happens under the ground, is as important as what's above ground. And if you don't have the root structure under the ground, you can't support what's above the ground. And in organizational teams, high performance is not just built on competence and productivity. High performance is built on relationships. It's built on trust. It's built on purpose. It's built on consciousness. It's built on appreciation of the unique strength of every single person. And so these soft things, these less tangible, sometimes less invisible, less visible rather, aspects of working with people are not really counted as something that's important. So there's a chapter in there on why the soft skills and the soft, non visible or less visible parts of our team and our relationships with each other really matters to our performance.
That's great. And I'd love to have you back on the show to discuss your book when it comes out. But we are almost out of time. Where can people find you?
You can find me at my website, kathleenallen.net, all one word. And if you go there, you can sign up for my weekly insights and blogs. And I also host with four other colleagues a monthly call on regenerative leadership. And it's a free thing, and we have a wide range of conversations and topics, and people can come and join us. It's at 1:00 on the third Tuesday of every month.
Perfect. And I'll include links so people can find you and sign up for that in the description of the podcast you guys are listening to right now. And before we go, what is one tip that you would have for someone who wants to try and reconnect to nature?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you don't have a lot of time, one simple thing is to go outside and sit in nature and sit quietly, because nature, when a person comes in and they don't know whether you're a prey or predator, what happens is everything quiets down. But if you go and sit and then wait, nature starts showing up again. So something beautiful happens, and you just start noticing the birds that are flying overhead, and the noise that the squirrel makes, or the wind flowing through the trees. That's absolutely necessary to grow strong stalks. So you begin to see how things connect. So that would be one. And I think I found my passion for nature in two places. One, in taking a walk. And the second is I like to garden. And so putting my hands in the soil is very much of a simple reconnection.
It's beautiful. Excellent tips. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today, Kathy. And until next time, get outside and develop something wild.
Thanks for joining Wild Development Studio. We hope this exploration into the world of wildlife arts and adventure has sparked a desire to get outside and connect with something wild. If you have an adventure that's awe-inspiring, don't hesitate to share. Click the link in the description to submit your story to have it featured on our show or be a guest. Until next time, keep connecting to the wild and see what develops. The views, opinions, and statements expressed by individuals during Wild Development Studio productions do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Wild Development Studio or its affiliates. Participation in any activities, expeditions, or adventures discussed or promoted during our content may involve inherent risks. It is strongly advised that individuals conduct thorough research, seek professional guidance, and take all necessary precautions before engaging in any such activities. Wild Development Studio, its representatives, or employees shall not be held responsible for any injury, loss, damage, accident, or unforeseen incident that may occur as a result of participating in activities inspired by or discussed in our content. By choosing to engage with our content or act upon any information provided, individuals do so at their own risk and discretion.